So maybe you value your retinas, you want at least a half-decent TV, but you also don't want to cry yourself to sleep because of how expensive it is. Well, you might want to look at the 2025 Hisense U75QG because it operates in that sweet spot of giving you, well, surprisingly good image quality for a surprisingly low price. Now, this is a 4K 165Hz plus VRR VA panel with 2,340 zones on the 75-inch version that I'll be reviewing today, which, by the way, was provided by Hisense for this review, so thank you to them. And it does come with their HiView Engine Pro processor. It supports Dolby Vision IQ, HDR10 Plus, HDR10, and HLG, so just about every HDR format. And it comes in at a very surprisingly low $999.99 for the 75-inch version. And it also surprisingly comes with a 2-year warranty, so there's a lot of surprises for this thing. And yeah, it looks like this is gonna be an extremely good purchase if it delivers, but the question is, does it deliver? Well, let's go ahead and find out by doing some tests. Now, if you don't know me, I'm Connor, the display guy, and I've reviewed a ton of monitors and TVs, but enough already. Let's jump into this one, and let's start off with the color. Now, in terms of the color, look, it's a mini LED, so it's not gonna quite match something like a QD OLED, and you can expect to see color results that might be somewhere around maybe an older generation WOLED, depending on what you're viewing. But as a whole, considering the price, I do feel like the color is impressive, especially considering how bright it can get. And I do feel like it does certainly give a convincingly colorful image that is gonna wow you if you're coming from older LCD displays. Now, in terms of the accuracy of this thing, while it does come in some sort of a power saving mode out of the box, that can quickly be fixed. And yeah, in SDR, holy moly, did I get some accurate results of this thing, both in terms of the brightness tracking, as well as the RGB balance, and even the near black performance. All those things were basically spot on, and even the color checker analysis, well, it came with an average delta of 1.6, which means the majority of colors, you probably can't even tell if they're off. Now in HDR, it's a little bit worse. It does slightly over brighten some HDR highlights, but once again, the RGB balance and even the near black performance is pretty good. And for HDR, also the color checker was pretty decent as well. It's not as good as SDR, but it was fairly accurate still, so pretty impressive. The one spot where it does fall behind is in that color. In the BT 2020 gamut coverage, I'm looking at 70.14%. The latest generation 4-layer WOLEDs are over 80%, and the QD OLEDs are also over 80%. Some of them are even getting close to 90% now, so it is a little bit behind the most expensive displays on the market with the most advanced technology. But as a whole, this is a very accurate display considering the price, so that's very surprising. And it also gives you pretty decent color. So if you're someone who's looking for a budget TV that gives you a bright, impactful HDR experience while not sacrificing on accuracy too much, this might be a great option for you. And by the way, I will have affiliate links to this display in the description below if you do want to buy it. But in any case, now let's talk about that HDR impact exclusively, because this TV, well, it can get bright, and I mean really bright, but it depends on the scene. So for example, in the peak window brightness test that I did at the D65 white point, it's actually giving results that are so good that I was shocked and had to rerun them because it's better than some of the most expensive TVs that I've reviewed. This is crazy. Take a look here. It's getting over 700 nits in a 100% window and over 3,400 in a 10% window. That is unbelievable. And in theory means it should be able to show you basically any HDR content without blowing it out. However, in real scenes, it depends. It can be way brighter than some other TVs, and it can be dimmer. It really depends on what you're looking at and what mode you put the TV in, because here at that same D65 white point in filmmaker mode, in Baldur's Gate 3, well, it falls a bit behind. Now it's on the lower half of the chart. So it is gonna give you a bit of a mixed HDR presentation, but overall, it does lean towards being very bright and very impactful. But that only matters if the contrast is also good. Is it? Actually, yeah, it's pretty dang good. You can see here that it's giving you over 15,000 to 1 for the contrast that I was able to measure, and even in micro contrast, getting over 6,400 to 1. That's very impressive for a budget display. And to put that into context, well, if you take a look here at this fireworks show, you can see that, yes, you will see blooming, and off angle, it's certainly the most noticeable, and that's why I captured it this way, to try and expose it to you guys. This is not gonna match OLED. OLED effectively has over 8 million local dimming zones, This is over 2000, so it's not gonna be at that same level. But if you do look at this straight on, or if you're in a brighter environment, it's gonna look extremely high contrast, and I think it'll surprise you and be certainly good enough for the vast majority of people. Just keep in mind, if you're in a very dark room, yeah, you might notice some blooming. Now, as for the ambient light handling, like I mentioned, this does well in a bright room because it has a semi-gloss coating with no weirdness like QD OLED that turns magenta. This does not, and so you can expect to see results like this. And yeah, it's gonna do great in a bright room, and that's certainly where I'd recommend using this TV. But what about the gaming? Is it good here too? And that depends. So in terms of total system latency, it does very well. 28 milliseconds is one of the better results that I've gotten, and that's very respectable, especially considering this can run up to 165 Hertz. Now, for most people, you'll probably be watching movies at 24 or 30 Hertz or playing games at 60 Hertz, maybe 120 Hertz on a console. But if you do hook it up to a PC, 165, I mean, that's actually a very good frame rate, and I love that TV manufacturers are pushing for higher refresh rates. That's awesome, but it doesn't do as well as you'd think. Take a look here at this UFO ghosting test. Unfortunately, despite the fact that it's running at 165 Hertz, there is noticeable trailing. Now, it's not too bad. I've certainly seen a lot worse, but when you compare it to the LG G5 OLED at 165 Hertz, you can see how OLED does a lot better, and even some other mini LEDs can do better. It just depends on what mini LED you're talking about and the panel technology. But as a whole, I do feel like the motion is certainly acceptable, and I think most people will be okay with it. I just hope they can continue to improve here. And speaking of motion, the motion interpolation wasn't quite as strong in this unit as I've seen on more expensive Hisense units. So on their more expensive TVs, I saw less issues with interpolation, and overall, the ability to run higher motion interpolation without seeing those weird artifacts and skipped frames. But on this one, I kind of had to stick around, 2 to 4 at the max without it introducing a lot of weirdness. So don't expect the best motion out of this, but it's also not the worst. It's kind of middle of the road. Now, in terms of features, it has a ton of features that you can use to adjust the picture to your liking, and there were two that I felt were pretty cool, such as the AI contrast and the SDR to HDR conversion, which can make the image look a lot higher contrast and more poppy than it might look otherwise. So it might be worth playing with those if you don't care about accuracy, but personally I keep them off. Now, in terms of text clarity and the sub-pixel layout, this isn't a perfect RGB, so there will be a slight hit to text clarity, but overall it's pretty good. This is using RBG, not RGB, and it does use a semi-gloss coating, so overall the clarity, it's pretty good. Not quite as crisp as a true glossy coating, but it's not gonna be as bad as a matte coating either, so it kind of lives somewhere between. And it's a bit of a trade-off. Personally, I'd prefer a full glossy coating, but I think most people won't be bothered by this, and it'll certainly be good enough. Now, as for the viewing angles and uniformity, it can quickly lose contrast once you start to go off angle, but the overall image quality, even at a significant angle, I think is all right. It's not the worst I've seen, it's not the best. It's certainly best viewed straight on, and you do lose a bit of color and punch as well, but if you're used to older LCD panels, I think this is gonna be, for most people, an improvement. It just didn't wow me. And in terms of the uniformity specifically, it's gonna be kind of a your mileage may vary. On my particular unit, it did look like it had some dirtiness to the screen and uniformity issues, and that can be pretty typical for more budget displays, but you might get one that has no problem. Now, the sound, I was a little bit surprised. It was pretty good overall. It had decent timbre, treble, and bass, but it wasn't amazing. I mean, it did have slightly weak mids, and the bass isn't gonna be as powerful as a full sound system. And of course, the treble isn't crystal clear, but as a whole, I do feel like it is a bit better than most TVs that I hear, so you might actually be able to get by without a sound system. It just depends on what you want out of your TV. Now, I did have a few issues with this, such as the dirty screen effect that I mentioned earlier. If you turn on VRR, I did have some VRR flicker in certain scenes, which was a little bit annoying. Especially if you hook it up to a PC, you might run into some issues there. And the four corners of the display did look like they were kind of wrapping in on themselves. That can be an issue depending on how LCD or mini LED based displays are bonded. it's kind of hard to describe, but you'll notice like a little bit more darkness in the corners. So there you have it. Overall, is this a perfect TV? No, it certainly has its issues. I mean, we just went over them, as well as the viewing angle problems and the contrast not being perfect. And of course, it's not going to be as good for gaming as OLED. But I mean, we're talking about a 75-inch mini LED TV with over 2,000 zones for under $1,000, and that is just absolutely crazy. And there's really nothing about this TV that's a major weakness. It does pretty much everything pretty good, and in a lot of ways, it's fairly close to some much more expensive mini LED displays. So for that reason, I feel like this TV is just really solid for the price. So I think I'm gonna give this one a solid 8 out of 10. It's excellent value. I certainly highly recommend taking a look at one if your budget is running up to $1,000. And when compared to more budget displays, I do feel like in a lot of ways it is worth jumping up to this to get that extra HDR punch that you might not get out of more value or budget displays. So really impressed with this one, and can't wait to see what Hisense does next year with their follow-up U7 model in 2026.